أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربي أنتقنا بالهدى وألهمنا التقوى. Assalamu alaikum everyone wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Come on guys, get into it. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. The partition is up if any ladies would like to come into this session for the Q&A. There's also going to be a link that is going to be put up on Menti, so you can submit your questions anonymously if you would like. As the link is now up, so you can just follow the instructions, and then if you would like to not speak, you can submit your questions online in this way, anonymously. While we are waiting for people to either start submitting questions or for the ladies to come, I just want to highlight something which I think I'll start doing on a more frequent basis. Alhamdulillah, our library is gradually increasing, alhamdulillah, and the books that we are getting are quite nice in selection. And so I wanted to just kind of select two books to highlight while we wait for any questions that might come up. The first book, I'm not sure if you can see, the first book is called Spiritual Mysteries and Ethical Secrets. I had mentioned this book a few lectures ago. This is a book on akhlaq. It's written by Mullah Faith Kashani, and it's the English translation of the book Al-Haqa'iq fi Mahasin al-Akhlaq. This was the text basically that we had used in the Hawza when we studied akhlaq, and alhamdulillah it's been translated into English, and it's translated by ICAS Press, and it's definitely a book for those interested in the subject of akhlaq. It's definitely worth purchasing. All ICAS books are not cheap, so this one I think we're selling it for $60. But what's really nice about this book is that not only does it discuss the subjects of akhlaq, but you find Mullah Faith Kashani was a spiritualist. At the same time, thank you, he was into spirituality, but at the same time he is recognized as being like a hadith expert, right? So he had this joined commonality of a mystic and a hadith expert, and so you find like a really beautiful collection of hadith here. So this is a book that I think is definitely worth getting, and if like a few of you and your friends get it together, this is a really good book to have a book club on, right? So it's definitely, you can pick it up. I'm not sure how many copies there are. The second book that I wanted to highlight is this one is by Ayatollah Jaffer Subhani. It's called Resplendence of Wilaya. If you remember a while ago, there was this movie that had come out called The Message, if you remember. And The Message, there's a similar book on Al-Islam. It's called The Message, by Ayatollah Jaffer Subhani, and I'm not sure if that's where the movie was made from, but the movie was more not necessarily our madhab as such, but he had written a book called The Message a long time ago, which was the Prophet's life, and now he's come out with this book called Resplendence of Wilaya, and this basically is an entire book that covers the life of our first Imam alayhi salam, and it's a fantastic book, right? Like it goes into a lot of detail about his early life, as the Prophet's son-in-law, some of the challenges that he went through during that time, and then his entire khilafah and all the different struggles he went through. So this is a great historical book. I know oftentimes people are looking for books of history to read. The Message is a really good book by Ayatollah Jaffer Subhani. This book by Ayatollah Jaffer Subhani is also an absolute worth getting. So these two books I would highlight for you, and I hope inshallah for those interested, we'll pick it up in our library, both in the men's and in the ladies' side today. Can we recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? Ahma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So the first question that is submitted has to do with the months of Muharram and Safar in particular. So it's a dual question. The first question is basically that oftentimes we hear in the musibah and in the story of Karbala, varying narrations. And so sometimes you will hear that Aliyun al-Akbar was the oldest, then you will hear Imam al-Sajjad was the oldest. At other times, you hear stories like Qasim's wedding took place. Other times you hear different accounts, and these are just some of the examples. And so the question is like, how do we reconcile all of these points? I think this is a really good, it's a good question to start off with. The Azadari is very sensitive, and so when you talk about something that somebody may not agree with, we are very quick to blacklist people and boycott people and things like that. I'll give you my thoughts on this. My thoughts on this are that there are things that we know happened for sure. And then there are things that are what's known as khabarul wahid. We got reports from various narrations, but they came from different sources and they don't add up to something that brings about absolute certainty. Those things which bring about absolute certainty are events like the event of Ghadir, for example. Absolute certainty, no one will deny that. The event of Karbala and Ashura, no one denies that. Imam al-Hussein being killed, no one denies that. Abbas being killed, no one denies that. The family being taken as prisoners, again, no one denies any of these facts. These are agreed by all Muslims and all historians, anyone who studies Islamic history. And so these are known as things which are firmly established. And then there are what I would say are the granule things, the more detailed things, like Ali Akbar said the following thing to Imam Hussein, and Imam Hussein replied back with the following thing. These are known as khabarul wahid, meaning that they've come from sources, but they haven't come from so many sources that we can say certainly this is the conversation they had. And the reason being is quite obvious, right? So on the plains of Karbala, you had, how do we know the narrations of what happened, right, in detail? So we know them, from example, from the reporters that were assigned to cover the event. So Yazid had sent reporters, and there were people there who were there to report back. So that's one channel that we've gotten. The second way that we've understood is from the Imams that came after. So Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam would narrate events. Imam al-Baqir would narrate things that have happened. And then the third channel, or the third way that we have received this information, is from when Mukhtar carried out his revolt. And so when he would arrest people, they would begin to recount these stories as well. And so we get from this information conversations and things of that nature. What I would like to say is that don't keep your hope or your faith attached to these singular things. Your faith should be attached to the event. And so whether Aliyun al-Akbar was the oldest or whether Aliyun al-Akbar was second, that shouldn't matter in the long phrase, right? Whether the companions of Abu Abdullah had water until the night of Ashura, or whether they water cut off on the 7th. It shouldn't matter, right? Our faith shouldn't be on these granular things, because at the end of the day, there are different accounts to these things, right? But our faith should be on the tragedy itself. And so I think if we detach ourselves from the particularities, then we can be more comfortable about this event. Now, to add on to that, I think we also, orators and khutbah have a tremendous responsibility, that when they orate something, when they speak something, that it should be something that's credible, right? And so credibility is the responsibility of the speaker and the one who is giving the khitab. And this is something that I think we have a responsibility of, and anybody who takes the mimbar or the podium should not just retell a story because they heard someone else retell a story, but they should find it in a source and be able to tell that story. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect I would say is the audiences, that you need to be more careful where you develop your history from, right? And so a lot of times, unfortunately, we end up developing the understanding of Karbala from Marsiyas and Latams, for example, or Matams, when that's the wrong place to get history from, honestly, right? Like, because they have a huge, or not they utilize a huge poetic license, yeah, to flowerize what they want to say. They may talk about conversations and things of that nature that really never happened. And so don't take your history from that, rather take your history from more credible sources. There are books on this subject. And at the same time, we have a responsibility. So it's a really long-winded answer, but I think it's important. As far as the more granular details, like based on my research, and again, I could be proven wrong in the long run, but based on my research, things like Aliyun al-Akbar was the oldest. That is why he's known as Aliyun al-Akbar, right? Otherwise, the fourth Imam would have been known as Akbar because he would have been the oldest Ali, right? And so that's one thing. Qasim's wedding never happened, right? Based on my research. Yeah, things like that. I mean, like we can go into like really more details, but at the same time, I think in some ways it'll break people's faith, to be quite honest, if we were to go more. So like we generally just don't leave out. I think the problem that comes, is that like we want to hear certain things in Masaib. And if we don't hear it, then we think the musibah was incomplete, And so this has happened to me multiple times, right? Like, so for example, and maybe we won't save this online, but for example, like on the night of Shami Ghariba, like since I was a child, we heard Imam Ali came there's no accounts of that happening. I'll be really honest, right? There's no book that says that happened. Now, does that mean it didn't happen? No, I can't say that, but I can tell you I haven't found it in any book that I've read. Maybe it was a dream she saw, maybe, right? But there came a time when I stopped reciting that because I wasn't sure about it, and I take that responsibility quite seriously. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been criticized for not reciting that. So right after that, they'll put that Marsiya Ab Aaye Ho Baba just to counter what I've said because I didn't say it, And so my point is, like, we are waiting to hear it. When we don't hear it, we feel like the musibah wasn't complete. When we shouldn't be attached to these little granular things, but we should be focused on the tragedy itself, right? And so, really long-winded way of saying that. Another question that associated with that is, how do we better prepare ourselves to maximize these months? I think I'll talk about this at Jummah next week, of how to prepare for these months. Next Thursday's lecture is also about preparing for this. I'll just save that conversation for next week, just so that we have more time for other questions. All right, any questions from the audience here? There's no ladies who have shown up, so the mic is all yours, gentlemen. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
I have a Homs related question.
Sure.
A bit of an obscure one, but okay, let's say I have my Homs date, and on my Homs date I get paid. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I have to pay Homs on that like salary that I get for that day, or is it whatever I got that midnight that at that point is what I have to pay Homs on?
You got super granular on me.
I
know. I would say the following. Your Homs dates basically kicked in at 12:01. Yeah? If your salary was already in your bank at that time, you can subtract your regular occurring payments that would have come out from that 2 week salary. So like, let's say you had a car payment due 2 weeks later, but that's where the money comes out from, you can subtract all that. And then whatever is left, it would be considered your savings. But if 12:01 happens and you really haven't, the paycheck hasn't kicked in, then I would still say pay it. If it came on the same day, I would say pay it, but I don't think you have to because it didn't come by the time the home state kicked in.
Follow-up question. Follow-up question though, because you said that I can cut it up. again, I don't know how correct this is, but I've heard some of our elders say that, oh, because you have debts and things like that, you don't have to pay your homes. Like, where does that come from?
No, so Sayyid Sistani has a new ruling, may Allah give him a long life, about homes when it comes to one's mortgage. If somebody has a mortgage and any large loan, they can not pay homes on that. But this is new. So what our elders have been saying is not correct in that way. This is a very new ruling where you then add up your savings cumulatively and compare it to the loan amount. And as soon as the savings increases the loan amount, then there's homes due on everything. So I would say the details of that, I think one can go research. But as far as what the elders were saying, long-term debts that you have chosen to pay on a monthly basis do not exclude you from paying khums. The same way these long-term debts do not prevent you from going to Hajj. So like if you have a mortgage and you say, well, I have an outstanding loan, I can't go. No, like you're allowed if you have a monthly recurring. So because you've chosen to go at it monthly recurring, then you would have to pay khums on it. Yeah? You're welcome. What are the, I'd be wasting a lot of it. It's a good question. What are the best aspects of your job as the resident alim? I'll answer this. This is fun. What's the best part of my job? They didn't say what's the challenging. They said best aspect. I can't whine and complain now. You know. Best aspects of my job are many. I get to constantly learn. That's like I can't thank Allah enough for that. To prepare anything, I have to constantly learn, and so I'm constantly growing as a person. Alhamdulillah, I get to interact with people. I enjoy that. You know, I just feel like it also forces me to put a lot of things into practice. The verse of the Quran, "Lima taquluna ma la taf'alun." Why do you say that which you yourself do not do? I remember our teacher always saying that before you talk about anything, apply it, right? And if you can't apply it, don't tell others to apply it. And so it forces me to do a lot of things that I may not have been able to do. It forces me to come to mosque, yeah, to be honest, right? Like, I feel that the people who, like you, who have come to mosque when no one is forcing you to come to mosque, I think that's fantastic. Sometimes I feel God puts us in a situation because He wants something done. So maybe if I wasn't a resident alim, maybe I wouldn't come to mosque as frequently. So the fact that I have to come, I get a blessing from that. So there's a lot of really good things about my job that I enjoy, alhamdulillah. There are a lot of things that I don't enjoy, but that wasn't the question. But there are things that I can honestly say, like, I think I was born to do this. You know, I feel good. Alhamdulillah, I enjoy it very much. Questions from the gentleman? Anybody?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
This might not be related with what we discussed tonight, but suppose you're stranded in the area in which you do not have enough water. This is for wudu. Or if you do have water, but it's best to save it for drinking.
Okay.
But in return, you have like wipes that are wet. So like suppose for cleaning the body or any form of things,
Yeah.
even like makeup wipes.
Yeah.
So could we use that to perform wudu since they still contain water, but maybe not water? I mean,
Yeah.
it would be the chemical for cleansing.
So we're talking about a situation, so it can't just be like I'm driving from here to there and I have enough water to drink and not to do wudu, because that you can stop at any gas station and buy. So you're talking about a situation where you're truly stranded. So let's
Yes,
assume that.
I spend a lot of time outside the city, towards the forest area or towards the rocky areas. And sometimes I find myself in the area, I'm like, the only thing I have is a water bottle for drinking and a lot of like wipes.
Yeah.
But no source of water.
So no, wipes wouldn't work for wudu. So it's in that situation. So water, you have to have water. So obviously, I don't want to give you an out for your situation. I think in your situation, you can wait until you have later to do wudu and pray. You can take extra water with you. You can stop somewhere. So I'm just saying, let's just assume worst case scenario, okay? You have to have water to do tayammum, and if you don't have enough water, then you have to have water to do wudu. And if you don't have enough water, then wipes wouldn't work. You would have to do tayammum with the earth at that point. Wipes are not, even though they may have moistness, they don't have like wetness. And so they don't replace, they are not a tool of taharat, basically, of cleanliness or purity, right? So even when one goes to the bathroom, you can use wipes for number 2, but you can't use wipes for number 1, because urine can only be purified with water, nothing else, right? So the wipes may serve a purpose, but so even like, what is this thing that we use? Huh? Sanitizer. Hand sanitizer. Like hand sanitizer may clean your hand, but it doesn't make it tahir. You know what I mean? Like the difference between the two. So there's cleanliness and taharat, purity. So water can only bring purity, but the other things may clean you, but they don't serve the purpose of purity. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does it break our salah if we reach down during qiyam to silence a ringing phone or calm a crying baby? A good question, right? So this happens a lot. When we're praying, someone's phone will go off, or someone's baby's crying. So you're allowed, while standing, to pause reciting and bend down and turn off your phone and then stand back up and continue, okay? Or if you're standing in qiyam and your baby is crying, you're allowed to pick your baby up and hold them and continue their qiyam. And then you would have to maybe put them down for ruku and things like that. But you just, the rule is you just have to stop reciting at that time. And obviously, so like a ruku is only a ruku with the intention of it being a ruku. So if I'm bending down to pick up something, obviously for a great purpose. So it's not just random, I'm picking up like lint from the floor, right? Like, so we're picking up something that is distracting to other people. There's a spider crawling, I'm afraid it'll bite something, I can maybe push it away kind of thing. But yes, you're allowed to. So you just have to pause reciting, and then when you come back standing, then you continue your recital. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
Just to follow up on that
Yeah.
one. So the same rule pretty much applies when you're in Jama'ah. And let's say there's a spot that's emptied off. You can pause reciting and then step and fill up
Absolutely.
that gap.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, good point. So like even this happens, so let's say if there are 2 people who are praying, and so they stand like, so if this is the imam, this is the person standing right next to the imam, so they generally would stand to the right of the imam, very close, almost together, but just a slight tad behind. But if a third person walks in, ideally the third person would go behind the imam, and then they would tap the person on the right, and then they would move back. And so now you have created a line of jama'ah. But when you're moving back, you shouldn't move back in ruku, obviously. But when you're standing, you pause reciting, move back, and then you continue with your salah. So that's allowed. And we see our brothers do that a lot, but we're allowed to do that as well. But it's just there has to be a pause in reciting when we do that. Good. Anybody else from the men's side? Yeah.
To follow up,
Yes.
where is the person standing behind? On the right side or on the left side?
What do you mean?
While joining the Jamaat.
So he would just come right back.
Yeah. I mean, if it's
To the
only
right
2.
side, to the right side.
Thank
so
you.
yeah.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, you start on the right side and you go that way. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
Since you're on the
assalam.
Jamaat, a question on the Jamaat. Suppose you are in line with the Jamaat and your wuzu breaks. what would you do at this time? And would you still remain in the line until the what you call salah finishes, or you get out of the what you call jama'ah?
Nightmare situation. I'm praying that never happens, inshallah, yeah? But no, your salah is batil at that point, so you would have to leave.
You may what you call be disconnecting the jama'ah. That's
By your wudu being batil already, you're already disconnecting the jamaat.
okay. So you can leave the jama'ah.
You have to leave, yeah.
Okay.
Now if you're in the first line,
Yeah.
then technically the person should slide over, or somebody from behind should come up front if you're in
Okay.
the first line. But also what we understood during COVID is that the space between people were allowed like almost like a big step, like a meter, not a meter,
Yeah.
something like that. Was it 1.2, right? Yeah. And so that's a big step. So if you look at our musallas here, you can actually skip a musalla and still be connected. And so if no one moves up or to the right, then the people on the other side are okay. They can still continue. If it happens in the back lines, it doesn't matter at that point. The connection's coming from so many places that people don't have to panic, but move. But as for your salah, you should. If you don't move, then the people's connections in the first line gets broken.
Okay.
Yeah, so the same thing applies, for example, if somebody is praying, if they're a traveler, and they're praying in the first line, when they finish their 2 rakat salah, if they don't get up immediately and they just end up sitting, they're now a barrier. And so even though the space isn't that much, they serve as a barrier, and everyone else's salah is broken from the jamaat. They can continue furada. And so always the recommendation would always be to leave.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We should have just given a mic on the ladies' side. If a child wants to come and grab a mic, there's a mic here for the ladies' side in case there is a question from that side. How do we reconcile Surah Fatiha verse 5 and the Shia practice of saying Ya Ali Madad? I'm assuming the verse we're talking about is Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. That only you we worship and only you do we seek help from. I think that understanding, that is our belief in Tawheed. Our belief in Tawheed is that everything comes from Allah. Allah is the source of everything, right? And so, but the understanding of the position of the Prophet and the awliya, and the fact that God has provided them what's known as wilaya takwiniya, yeah, like the ability to answer dua and to be that wasila, right? Like Allah says in the Quran, if only you had gone to the Prophet and he would have sought forgiveness for you, Allah would have forgiven you. And so Allah shows us that He has given them and certain things the ability to carry out God's work. Like the shirt of Prophet Yusuf returned the eyesight of Prophet Yaqub. Right? Yaqub alayhi salam was a prophet. He could have just made dua, but Allah said use the shirt. And so what this tells us is that Allah has created intermediaries. And so I think when a person says Ya Ali Madad, I really believe that as Shia, like we're not thinking Ali is replacing God at this moment. Right? I don't think anybody says that or thinks that. But we believe that this is a position God has given them. So I see no contradiction between Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in and Ya Ali Madad, in my opinion. Yeah. All right. Any questions on the ladies' side? No? Okay. Any question in the men's side? Yeah, Ahmed. Sorry, you can give it to Jaffer by in the back, and now I'll get it from you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
It's
salam.
a history question about the Muharram coming in.
Sure.
Do you, I agree with your two statements about Hazrat Ali Akbar and Qasim.
Yeah.
It's a very good thing to know. What about, do you know anything about Zuhair Khan, who was not the follower of Imam Ali?
Yeah.
When he was asked by Imam Hussein alayhi salam to come and talk to him, do you know anything? What did Imam said and he changed his mind?
to be honest, like what I recognize or what I have read is that he was hesitant, and then something happened where he was convinced. Now, what the exact conversation was, I don't know at this moment. Like there's a book outside in the table. It's called Chronicles of Imam Hussein. Can you just bring that? Do you mind? Yeah. I was going to save that book for another lecture, but this book, for anyone who's interested in the history of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, so all these books are expensive. This is what? $70. I ordered this book when it first came out. It cost me $130 to get it delivered. Well worth the money. Yeah? It's called Chronicles of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. It's put together by Ayatollah Ray Shahri. And it was translated by Sheikh Abbas Jaffer of London. He's recited here multiple times. This book is one of the most comprehensive historical books of Karbala that I've seen. Yeah, the author is Ayatollah. Yeah, he has his own manhaj. Manhaj meaning his own philosophy when it comes to how he gauges whether something is accurate or not. I don't necessarily agree fully with the manhaj, but I rely on this book a lot. And his manhaj or his methodology is basically saying that I have only selected material about Karbala that has come from the first 300 years after Ashura. Yeah? He says if something has come from later books that did not exist in the first 300 years, I don't accept that because there's been too large of a gap. Right? And so what he has here is, it's the entire book, and he has detailed conversations and things like that. Well worth it. And he has a whole section of fabrications. And I honestly, like when I read this book, like it forced me to change my entire philosophy, not my entire masaib, yeah, because this is when the reality came that I can't just recite what I've heard others. And so I created my own manhaj after this. So this is his methodology. But what that does is it prevents, for example, he excludes books like Nafas al-Mahmum of Sheikh Abbas Qummi, because that came much later. And there are many things that Sheikh Abbas Qummi mentions that he would say is a fabrication because I haven't seen it in the first 300 years of books. But my philosophy is Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi is not an ordinary person. He's an absolute scholar, right? And so if he found something, there is a possibility that existed, that we just don't have that today. And so I have taken this, Nafas al-Mahmum, specific scholars, not every scholar, but specific scholars who recite Musibah, and I believe, and this is how I've created it. The point being that he has an entire section on Zuhair bin Qayn, I think, in here. So if you don't want to buy it, you can browse it just to see what it says. Or not an entire section, but he has his history, and I think it would be here at that point. Yeah? Any questions on the lady side? Okay, we'll take a question from here. Why do we have so much cursing in ziyarat? And why curse Prophet's companions all the time? It happened in the past, so why all these now? I don't know, man. I would tell you, go back and listen to my lectures on Tawalla and Tabarra, and to understand, so nowhere are we cursing anybody, yeah? I think that's the first thing we have to understand. We're not cursing a soul. We're sending la'an upon people, and as we said, la'an is translated because there is no good translation as a curse, but it's really a condemnation. And we explained that when we're sending la'an upon someone, la'an is the opposite of rahmah. And so when we're sending la'an upon somebody, we're asking God to remove their rahmah mercy from that person. And when one's mercy is removed, when God's mercy is removed from a person, that person is mal'oon. Yeah, they are condemned, right? And so, from a factual linguistic perspective, there's absolutely nothing wrong with sending la'an. It's translated as curse, but it's not a curse word. Yeah, it's like saying to somebody, "I curse you," right? Like it's not a profanity that we're saying that we're cursing them. And so we have to understand the importance of la'an in the concept of tawalla and tabarra, and I would advise you to listen to my majalis from the 3rd, 4th, 5th of Sha'ban when I talked about tawalla and tabarra in great detail. As far as this idea that it happened in the past, why are we remembering them? Then we might as well not do anything in our faith. Yeah, we might as well not remember Ghadir, we might as well forget Karbala, we might as well, because it happened so long ago, what's the point? We might as well forget the Prophet then, right? And so these are things which are crucial to our faith, they are important. I've shared this story with you before many times, and I think, I don't quote me on the name, but I believe it was Allama Majlisi, but I could be mistaken about the name, who is the author of Biharul Anwar, one of the largest collections of hadith that we have, who was asked that why do you Shia always remember Muharram? Yeah? And again, he came hundreds of years later, and he said, you guys remember it like it was yesterday, don't you think it's about time you forgot it? And he replied back and he said, we did not emphasize Ghadir enough and you forgot it. We will never stop remembering Ashura because you too will forget it at that time. Yeah, it's important, it's part of our faith, and the concept of love and hate in Islam is fundamental. Yeah, it's fundamental. I know we don't like using the word hate, but my God, if you study love and hate in the concept of our faith, it is probably the most important ingredient to secure our faith. Yeah? And if you know whom to love, you will know whom to hate. And this is part of the faith. God sends la'an, the Prophet has sent a la'an. We can't say we're too good to send la'an at that point. Yeah? All right. Any questions from the ladies' side? No? Not yet? All right. Any questions from the men's side? Yeah, Ahmed had a question.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam.
We should do this more often.
Thank you.
But essentially, my question is more so about who, not in a sense of taking taqleed, but how else can we utilize our muraja? For example, looking at the lives of Sistani, looking at the lives even past muraja like Sayyid al-Musa al-Sadr, or the various muraji we had in the past. How can we utilize them in other aspects, but not just limiting to taqleed, or from a fiqh aspect?
It's a good question. I think you would utilize, so like the idea of taqleed in itself is huge, right? So we also, I think when we talk about taqleed, I think what we take sometimes for granted is that the fact that they have agreed to be a marja means that they have decided to carry the weight and burden of everyone who does their taqleed on their shoulders. So tomorrow when I die and they say, why did you do this? And I'll be like, but Sayyid Sistani told me to do it. I get no accountability. Accountability falls on him. Yeah? And so that's not something we take lightly, right? I think we hear this story all the time of a man who came to, and again, like, I think it was Ayatollah Khomeini, but I'm not sure, rahimahullah, and they gave him their khums, and it felt like he thought he was doing a favor, you know, and he gave the khums and he was smiling, and they said, why are you so happy? He said, I paid khums. He's like, now you've given me that burden to pass it out, right? And so what that means is that, like, we have to appreciate that when we do their taqleed, they're taking a huge burden from us. And so when we see a law, we're not in that position to say, but I don't agree with this. Who are we to say I don't agree with this, right? So that's one thing. But I think from another perspective, like you had mentioned, I think you can look at their lives, you can look at the struggles that they went through in their lives. Their biographies of all of these great scholars are out there. You look to see how they spent their youth, how they spent, especially the recent block of Maraja, and all of them. But from Iraq, many of them were prisoners of Saddam, many of them were tortured, many of them were killed by Saddam. And so you see that how their faith never wavered throughout all of these obstacles, and that serves as an inspiration for all of us. Role models, exactly. And not to mention the fact that they've written tremendous books as well, so you can find that. Good question though. Any other questions on the men's side? Yeah, let's pass it here. Yeah, turn it on.
Going back to just namaz real quick. In Jamaat, well, two questions. Number one, in Jamaat, when you're doing qunut, if let's say the Imam of the Jamaat, he's doing a qunut that maybe I'm not familiar with, is it okay for me to recite my own qunut?
Yes.
Okay. And second question is, if I'm reading namaz on my own, is qunut wajib still, or is it recommended?
It's
Or can I skip it?
Qunut is never wajib.
I can skip it.
Qunut is highly recommended, and I would say don't get into the habit of skipping it,
Okay.
right? In fact, like qunut is one of those things that if you forget it, we are told to make it up after our prayers,
Yeah.
though it's mustahab.
Yeah.
And so I would say don't get into the habit of skipping it.
And then is Sami Allahu liman hamida, is that necessary, or can I just come up from ruku and then just go straight to Allahu Akbar down?
All of these things, like all of the adhkar, like the Allahu Akbar is the istighfar between sujood, the Sami Allahu liman hamida, the qunut, all of these things are not wajib parts of the salah. But I would consider them to be things which add the jamal, the beauty in the salah. And so the only times I would ever recommend skipping it is when you are reciting a bunch of salahs together for qadha, for example. So if you are reciting 50 rakat or 100 rakat the way we do in Shahrul Ramadan, then to shorten it, you kind of skip these things. But we still don't skip qunut because it's that important, right? But I would say like, don't skip it. Like there's like, literally these things add up to like 30 seconds of the prayer, you know? And so, because once it becomes a habit, it becomes a problem, right? Any questions on the ladies' side? To build on the khums question, for the dollars that are going into our pension amount, we don't have control over this amount, and it could go up or down since it was invested in a market. How should we take out khums? So I'm assuming that you have control over how much is going in to your pension. Isn't that true or no? Yeah. Even in general, like even if you have a pension from work, you know what percentage is going in or no? Yeah, from work. Typically it's a defined benefit. So it is a defined benefit. But you're choosing how much to define it as. No, but like the amount that your employer demands, you know how much is going in, right? At the end of the day, you know how much is going in. So
your portion, not
your
the
portion.
employee.
Yeah,
not
the
employer's.
matching is varied, right? I agree with that, right? So when it comes to like, let's just give the example of RRSPs, for example. Let's say I decide to put in 5,000 into my RRSP every year. You have three choices. The first choice is that when you put in that 5,000, before you put it in, you take out khums, and then the money you put in is already mukhammas, it's already clean. And so what happens is that at the end of the term, whenever you cash it, your own portion is khums free, you don't have to pay anything at that time. The second option is that you put in the 5,000, and then with some other money somewhere else, you pay 1,000 for khums, and then consider that entire 5 paid. I know there's a variation of like 200, but then that gets like, it never ends, that variation. Then you can consider that paid. The third option is you don't pay khums on it at all. This is only true for investment portfolios that will cause you to be penalized if you were to take something out. So it's not true for stock market, for example. You can cash that out. Yes, there is tax implications, but that's different. We're talking about losing some of your money if you were to withdraw like an RRSP. So then you have the third option is you don't pay anything. You just pay you don't pay khums at all on that savings. And then when it's time to cash it out, as soon as you get your portion, you have to pay khums on it right away. And then the matching portion, if it remains with you for a year, you would pay khums on that. And so you would have to keep a track of what was your portion and then you can pay the khums accordingly. I hope that answers that question. What is considered a rukn? Is the action or is the recitation? Example, when in sajda, is it prostrating or is it the recitation that is the rukn? So in salah, we have rukn and ghair rukn. So are you guys okay with continuing or no? Yeah? So can we just serve tabarruk? I think we had mentioned. So whoever is there, if you can please just serve tabarruk, and I'd appreciate it. So, yeah, we'll continue, but we'll. Yeah, please. Yeah, ahsant. So in our salah, we have two wajibats really. We have what's known as rukn and what's known as ghair rukn. Rukn are those absolutely compulsory parts. Ghair rukn are also compulsory parts. The only difference being that a rukn, if you add an extra one, or you forget doing it intentionally or unintentionally, your salah is batil, right? So this is your niyyah, takbiratul ihram, the beginning one, ruku, 2 sajdas, and so it's actual sajda. So you can go into sajda and not recite anything, not purposely, because that falls under the ghair rukn, right? But let's say I go into sajda, I daydream, I sit up, and I go back to sajda, I daydream, I get up. You've done both sajdas. And so you fulfilled the rukn aspect of it. And the 5th rukn is what's known as qiyam muttasil bir ruku. This is the standing that you have to do before ruku, right? And I'd say like we sometimes misunderstand this, because I know how I was taught. I was taught that you have to pause before you go. But that's not really the qiyam that is connected to ruku. What it means is that, let's say for example, I'm standing and I forget ruku and I go into sajda. And then I remember that I haven't done my ruku, I am allowed to get up. But when you get up, you can't go from sajda to ruku. You have to first have a qiyam and then ruku, because a ruku is only preceded by a qiyam. Make sense or no? Yeah? And so these are the 5 rukn. The ghair rukn are those things that if you forget to do it unintentionally, your salah is okay. I'm okay, thank you. So let's say for example, I forgot to do tashahhud, and I just stood up after my 2nd rakat, and I start my 3rd, but I did it accidentally. You're allowed to go back into tashahhud unless you've gone to a next rukn. Yeah? So let's say I forgot to do tashahhud and I get up, and while I'm in qiyam, I say to myself, I think you forgot tashahhud. I'm allowed to sit down, do tashahhud, and start my 3rd rakat and continue. But if I had already gone to ruku, then I'm not allowed to go back to fix another thing. But because I did it accidentally, it doesn't invalidate my salah. Right? And so these are like tashahhud, salam, the dhikr, qiyam, and muwalat and tartib. Yeah? Like in order, sequential order, and in a timely way. So you can't just have like a daydream of 10 minutes and then do ruku and daydream. So it has to be done. These are the rukn and ghair rukns. Alright, any questions on the lady side? I always think there's never going to be questions, but it's like a ton of questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So what is the Islamic etiquette of saying salams to the opposite gender? Let's say like you're at a grocery store or if there's only one girl and you're saying salam to like a non-mahram, what is the recommendation in that situation?
Like whether or not to say salam to her, like
Yeah,
at
let's
an
say that
Islamic
you
store,
don't-
like at an
yeah. Or like just you and a non-mahram, you see her and you say salam, is that recommended or no?
That's a good question. I think if it's just a salam of like while you're maintaining your haya in every way, looking down, just walking by, just saying salam, I think saying salam to a Muslim is always recommended. But if that salam is going to lead to something else, then you should avoid it. You know what I mean? But if it's just a salam and you're not engaging in conversations and things like that, just salam alaikum and you walk by, that is I think mustahab, and I don't think it doesn't interfere with the hijab. Yeah? But the rest of the haya has to be there. Any other questions on the men's side? Yeah, in the back, yeah. He has a mic or no?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So my question is that is this so compulsory to use sajdaga, but like in case if you don't have, so still we can offer the salah without sajdaga?
So yes, it is wajib to use a sajdaga, a turba. But if you don't have a turba, then there's a series of things you can use. For example, something natural like a leaf or clay or things like that. Even a piece of like fabric, for example, you can put it down. But these are all in order of like availability. But the actual sajdaga doesn't have to be the sajdaga we use, but having something natural is wajib, right? And so it could be a leaf, it could be anything, but just something that grows from the ground or comes from the ground, that is a wajib part of our salah. And it's because the Prophet always used to pray in that. So that's the way we were told to pray it. The sajdaga has just become a form for us to make it easier to have something present. Like I don't know if you saw, I think they were giving this out on the 20th anniversary, was like a business card that is like a thin piece of wood. Amazing thing. Yeah, you can just slide it into your wallet and you always have a sajdaga with you, right? Or your purse. But yes, something from the earth has to be there.
So my concern is that like if there's a musalla who's actually made with cotton, and the cotton is naturally organic product, right? So if the fabric of that musalla is actually being made through cotton, right, which is like natural crop, right? So still I can use that because if I don't have any like sajdaga, so still I can use that musalla and I can consider this is like organic.
I don't know. Yeah, I can find out. But I know that if we look on the order of things, like Sayyid Sistani, like who's the Taqleed I do, he has an order of things that he mentions. And so assuming that he understands that we're praying on a carpet anyways, or on a musalla, for example, he still doesn't say just use it the way it is unless you have tried to exhaust everything else. And then if you've genuinely exhausted everything else, I believe he says even use a tissue, then you can even use the back of your hand, for example. But considering that he would, I'm assuming, where else would you be praying? Like he doesn't give us that allowance just to say to pray on the carpet, unless it's like an absolute last resort, right? But that's a good question. I don't know. I'll try and check. If you're really curious, you can email me, and then when I'll check, I'll let you know, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Ahmed has a question.
I guess this is a follow-up from a question I asked you, like, I think a couple months ago.
Okay.
In one of the youth events. Essentially, to recap the question and then the follow-up, I'd asked, how do we manage the different responsibilities towards, for example, towards our parents, towards our spouses, towards our children, towards our friends? You had mentioned that our first responsibility is always to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now I guess my question now is, how can we ensure we keep Allah and Allah's commands at the forefront of the responsibilities while maintaining the, I don't want to say pull, but I'm gonna say pull from the other aspects of our lives.
It helps when everybody who has that pull, because there are things that we are supposed to be pulled by, right? So we are supposed to be pulled by our parents, our siblings, our families, spouses, etc. We pull by mean that we have responsibility towards them, right? It helps when everyone who I have a responsibility for is on the same page, that we're always going to be working under the umbrella of God's commands. If everyone is in agreement in that, then the pulls shouldn't be as conflicting. The moment we're on different umbrellas, then the pulls become problematic. In those moments, you have to make sure that your guidance comes from God, right? And you have to do it in a manner that you don't seem to be aggressively shunning somebody away.
I see. This may be like a little petty example, but it's one that comes out of my head. Let's say, for example, it's Eid time, and your parents want you to come over to their house, but your in-laws want you to come over to their house, but then your sibling who lives in like California wants you to come to their house.
Zoom. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you're not going to make everyone happy. You know what I mean? So are you asking, like, who do you prioritize? Who are the three people? Your parents, in-laws, and? Yeah, I don't know. You shouldn't. Yeah, you bring everyone to your house. No, like there should be a conversation that has to be had with the family to say that, look, like, not everyone can demand the same thing on the same day and expect everyone to be met. You know what I mean? And so either the two parents who, if they live in the same city, you split the time. So that, I think, is really important. That if your in-laws and parents happen to be living in the same city, there has to be an agreement between you and your spouse of how you're going to divide that time. And you cannot give more priority to one over the other. You absolutely cannot. And if you do, there will be chaos in your life, you know. Now, if they live in different cities, then that's different. Obviously, if one of the parents is a widow, that's different. You have to give maybe a little bit different attention. Not more, but different attention, right? But there should never be an expectation that one side deserves more. Otherwise, that marriage is not going to work. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Just a quick question going back on homes, and I think I know the answer, but let's
Then why are you
say
asking?
I think. Okay, so let's say I've invested $10,000 like in my personal portfolio last year, and now it drops like $9,000, and homestay comes around. And I'm not gonna pull it out on homes, so I'm gonna pull it out like maybe a couple months after my home state. It'll still be in the loss. But now, do I pay the homes on the 9,000 or the 10,000?
On your home, like, so this is an personal investment, meaning you can pull
I
it
can
out.
buy and sell whenever I want.
Yeah, you would, on your home state, whatever the balance is, that's what you pay homes on.
Okay.
So it's not the original. If it dropped, it dropped. It's just like any savings that you may spend. So like I have, like the highest, let's say I was able to save was 10, then I bought something, now it's 9. So you don't go back to what it was, is what it is now when you're paying homes. Yeah? Any other questions? Yeah, in the back.
This is a question I think I asked before, but I need to get clarification. If you're traveling to a country like India,
I know.
and you're staying in a hotel,
Yeah.
and now the food, whether you order room service or you go to the what you call restaurant down, how do you make sure that the food is halal, basically?
From the najasat perspective, not from the
Yeah.
halal perspective.
Yeah, from a just perspective, yani.
It's very difficult. Yeah. I say order room service.
Order room service.
Yeah. If you know, until you know, because again in India, yes, like the non-Muslims are greatly outnumbered, but the number of Muslims are in the hundreds of millions. It's not like a small, like here,
Yeah.
right? And so the possibility that it's being cooked by a Muslim is still quite significant. It's a good number. And so until you know for sure, I'm talking not just by who's serving you, about who's cooking. So if you're not seeing what's happening in the back end, you can assume you're allowed to eat. You're allowed to eat it.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you've seen who's cooking and you've seen that they're cooking with wet hands, then it becomes a problem. And so that's why, like, I know we sometimes would like cheekishly say, like, just close your eyes and eat it. In certain situations, that helps, because until you know, that's when the dhimma kicks in. But if I don't know and I'm not just being foolish about it, right? So like the fact that there are over 250 million Muslims in India, that's a significant number where it could very easily be cooked by a Muslim.
Recently, I was in the Iqbal Foods, and I saw people buying frozen meat from New Zealand, and it was stamped halal.
Yeah.
And I asked somebody, is this halal? They told me everything in Iqbal is halal. Don't ask about it. Everything is halal. So, can you just go and buy if it is stamped halal from New Zealand?
I think Iqbal's is certified by HMA, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, HMA, but HMA I think is a qualified certification, which is what we call fresh meat. I don't think it includes frozen meat about HMA.
I don't know. I think if you know that for sure, because I thought HMA only certifies like the entire operation and not partially.
Okay.
But if you are sure about that, I would still look to see who that stamp is. Now, generally speaking, New Zealand lamb is generally considered to be halal.
Okay.
Yeah, but because it's being sold in a place like a certified Muslim store, and we have generally acceptance of them as a whole, I would be okay with it.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you.
One more question, yeah? And you can, I don't know how to, yeah? I think Salah is what, 9:18? 19?
Yeah, so my question is more on the Quranic side of things. I came across an ayat, Surah Al Imran, ayat number 200. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu asbiru wasabiru warabitu wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. O you who believe, be steadfast, more steadfast than others. Be ready always, be mindful of God so that you may prosper. Now, when I first came across this ayat, my mind pretty much just went to Palestine, because the steadfastness, you have to be steadfast and patient. Now, when I look at this ayat, I want your insight in terms of like how we can kind of imply that in our lives. Sins, obviously, we have to stay away from, but is there anything more that we can do to remain steadfast so that we get closer to Allah?
I did a whole lecture on this, I think about a year ago, on Zainab's, I think it was her shahadat, I think. And so we explained the different ways to bring about that patience. I think the patiently enduring, some of it has to do with the patiently enduring of difficulties that are taking place, patiently enduring fighting my desires. And so I may want to do something, but because God has said it's not allowed, I fight that temptation. And so that fighting is a form of patience, right? And then that steadfastness. I think that steadfastness talks about taking the time to increase my faith to where when difficulties befall me, my feet stay firm. And so all of these different components together, I think, add up to that idea of how to be firm. It's in your faith, it's in your desires, it's in the difficulties. And when you can couple all that together, then you hit each one of these sections. And then obviously to be mindful of Allah. Yeah. We'll have to end here. I really like the engagement. Like he said, we should do this more often, but then I think you should send positive emails, you know? We're good as a people to send emails when we don't like something, but when you like something, it's nice that others, you share in that so that we can continue these type of programming. I will just end with a few words of Masaib, just to add barakah to this gathering. These are the days, if we look at it from a linear timeline, where Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam must have been on his way to Karbala or Kufa and then eventually being stopped. And it's in one of these days where he would be encountered by Hur in a place called Dhul Husam. And Imam had already camped there. And he knew that Hur's battalion was coming. And so he ordered his family and companions to fill water at a stop prior to that. And when they came, Imam gave them water. And then Imam prayed. And they joined the Imam in Salah. And then the Imam was about to leave, and Hur stopped the Imam. And he stopped him in a very audacious manner. He grabbed the reins of the horse of the Imam. And this, in their culture, was something you don't do. And so the Imam alayhi salam said, "Thaqulat ummuk ya Hur." Your mother will cry for you, O Hur. And Hur's reply was that if any other man in Arabia would have said this about my mother, I would have replied back in the same way. But he says, what can I say about you when your mother is Fatima? Yeah? And this was that love, really, of Fatima alayhi salam in the heart of Hur, that in my belief, it is what saved Hur on the day of Ashura, is that mahabba for Zahra that came back. And inshallah, we are able to increase our mahabba of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam in this world, so we can feel the benefits in the hereafter. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. Al-Fatiha.